Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday morning, February the 7th. All systems go for a significant pattern change by next week across the central and eastern states. We'll have warmer than normal conditions for the next few days, primarily focused over the central U.S., much of Canada, and then the whole temperature pattern starts to shift later next week. It looks like the front end of that transition will have a storm system to deal with in the mid-Atlantic region into the northeastern part of the nation, let's say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. It's always more difficult to get snow in the immediate I-95 corridor region without cold air being established upon the arrival of the low pressure system, but it's something that's will be a close call. Certainly areas north and west of the I-95 corridor can get some accumulating snow with this front end of the transition storm system that is likely early next week, and we'll talk about that over the next few minutes, especially those higher elevation locations to the north and west of I-95 have that chance for snow. First of all, let's give a quick update on the stratospheric warming event. Again, I kind of emphasize what's been going on in the stratosphere because my experience over the years is that it's can play a crucial role in the overall temperature pattern. And there's typically a lag that I have found in my many years of following the stratospheric warming event, maybe 4 to 6 weeks after warming occurs over the polar region. It has an impact on the U.S. temperature pattern. We had one burst of warming in December. We had another one early to mid-January, and it looks like over the next 10 days we'll have a third such stratospheric warming episode that could extend our colder than normal weather pattern well into the month of March, again, given that 4 to 6 week time lag. By the way, if you go to arcfieldweather.com to the Meteorology 101 page, I have a video. So just scroll down, you'll find a video I put out a few years ago on the whole stratospheric warming phenomena. Quite interesting. And I cite a few examples there, including 1985, which was a stratospheric warming event in December that led to a very cold wave, a very bitter cold wave across the nation in January. Again, maybe 4 to 6 weeks later. That was the month Ronald Reagan had his second inauguration, I guess January 20th in 1985. It was so cold they canceled all the outdoor activities, and that was in Washington, D.C. Here is the way it looks right now at the stratospheric level of 10 millibars. This is, again, kind of a top-down view. The North Pole located right here. This is the Asian side of the pole over here, and here is the U.S. Kind of a conventional-looking, a normal-looking polar vortex this time of the year. Typically, you'll see the colder temperatures associated with the polar vortex right over or right near the North Pole, as is the case right now. But take a look at what happens just 10 days out in a forecast map, a dramatic shift. Same viewpoint here, North Pole right here, a warming. Another warming, and it displaces that polar vortex. And again, that sets off a chain of events in the atmosphere that allows for transport of cold air masses from the high latitudes to the middle latitudes. Sometimes that ends up causing cold outbreaks on the other side of the pole, such as what happened earlier this winter. They had some bitter cold over China and North and South Korea, for example. This, I think, will help to extend this change to a colder than normal weather pattern in the central and eastern states that begins next week. I think will continue well into the month of March. It does not mean every day will be below normal by any means. That will not be the case. But that average period, let's say from roughly mid-February to mid-March, likely to be below normal, in my opinion, across the central and eastern states. So again, a big change coming to the stratosphere over the next 10 days with the third warming event of this winter season. Now, we've certainly talked about El Nino. Let's do a quick update on El Nino. These are warmer than normal sea surface temperatures out across the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean. This is a sea surface temperature anomaly map, the current, and here is your El Nino right in this region right here off the west coast of South America. This is the equator cutting right through this latitude right here. So here is your El Nino. Now, let me clear the deck here. In the last few days, I've been really impressed with what I call what's called the SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index. I looked at it again this morning, still very negative, not quite as negative as yesterday, but when the SOI drops in value into deep into negative territory, that is indicative of a strengthening El Nino. It's calculated by taking the pressure differences of two different sites in the South Pacific area. Well, one is Darwin, right in this area, and then the Tahiti Islands. And really, I think what it's reflecting can be seen right in this region, right here. A week or two ago, I showed this same map, and we had blues all along this region here, colder than normal conditions. But in the last several days, this has warmed up, and I think that's what that SOI is reflecting. Basically, an intensification of El Nino, or a broadening of the El Nino conditions out across the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean and a little bit farther south of the equator as well. And all of this helps to activate that southern branch of the jet stream that rips along the Pacific Ocean this time of the year, and occasionally will throw a big storm system into California. Really, you get at least two direct ways that an El Nino kind of, what I call, activates that southern branch of the jet stream. First of all, you get a lot of kind of buoyancy in this part of the world with warmer than normal sea surface temperatures, a little bit of rising motion, a little bit of upward motion down at the lower levels of the atmosphere because of those warmer than normal conditions. And the warmer than normal conditions here help to release some water vapor into the atmosphere. You warm up the water, some gases are released, including CO2, by the way, but water vapor as well. So that extra humidity helps to boost the southern branch of the jet stream. And California is winding down now with this second storm system of the past week or so. There may be a break for the next 7 to 10 days or so, but you can be sure that they'll get hit again in a continuing El Nino winter season. By the way, later on this winter season, certainly going on to the spring, I expect this will fall apart pretty rapidly, evolving into a La Nina by later this spring and certainly by the summer tropical season. La Nina in the tropical Pacific tends to increase activity in the Atlantic Basin. Expect to see an active hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin. Again, that's assuming, and I do believe this will be the case, we will have a flip here to colder than normal sea surface temperatures, maybe even a strong La Nina by the time we get to the middle part of the summer. Well, now let's take a look at last night's ensemble run of the European model. This is an ensemble run, has many different individual, they're called individual members, ensemble members. Each one of them has a slightly different initial condition. In other words, one of the ensemble members may be a little bit warmer than another. One may be a little bit drier, one a little bit more moist, and there's up to sometimes dozens. I think the European has upwards of 50 individual ensemble members, and they tend to smooth things out as you go forward in time because climatology kind of plays a role, and the overall maps that you'll see here, either 500 millibar anomalies or 850 temperature anomalies, will tend to get smoothed out as you go forward in time. So keep that in mind. In other words, the highs and lows will maybe look like they weaken with time, and that's just the nature of an ensemble run. But let's just move forward here. I want to point out this is the 500 millibar temperature anomaly pattern going forward, and again, all systems are go, in my opinion, for this significant pattern change to colder than normal coming up for the central and eastern U.S. beginning next week and likely continuing for quite a while into the month of March, again aided by ongoing stratospheric warming event. Here we are beginning the day here on Wednesday, February 7th. We'll just move forward here quickly, and I want to point out a few areas of interest here as we now get into Saturday, the upcoming weekend. Again, kind of washing out here. That's just the nature of an ensemble run. Things look like they're weakening. That's just because the model tends to smooth things out with time, so don't be focused on the color scheme here. Here we go into the early part of next week. This is now next Tuesday. Here's an upper level trough over the eastern part of the U.S., and that will be very likely associated with a front end of the transition storm system in the Middle Atlantic region. It looks like Monday, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday time period here, a deep upper level trough showing up. Now, notice also up here across Canada, you're starting to get intensification of the higher heights than normal here over the Hudson Bay region of Canada into Greenland. We'll go out a little bit farther in time, and here we go. We have a very impressive ridge developing here by next Thursday. This is a week from tomorrow, Thursday the 15th, and look at this kind of wind flow right here that typically follows these lines here. This is likely to result in some very cold air moving into the central and eastern states by middle latter part of next week. I expect to see very cold air relative to normal in the eastern U.S. at the end of next week, going into the following weekend, which I believe is President's Day weekend. Here we have strong ridging here over Alaska, west coast of Canada. This, by the way, is kind of associated with that plus PNA condition here, the Pacific North America teleconnection index. When it is in positive territory, it is usually correlated with that strong ridge over Alaska, the west coast of the U.S. And again, I mentioned in yesterday's video, that tends to take mild air that can flood the nation this time of the year from west to east. It shunts it up to the north towards Alaska. They've been extremely cold in Alaska relative to normal. They're always cold this time of the year, but even relative to normal, they've been very, very cold. Anchorage, just the other day, over the weekend I believe it was, hit minus 21 degrees. That's the lowest temperature in Anchorage since 2009. Not only a record for the date, but again, the lowest temperature in Anchorage all the way back to 2009. Well, they'll get a warm-up. For them, it'll be a warm-up relative to normal with this, the Pacific air being shunted up to the north, but that allows colder than normal air to drop into the central and eastern U.S. Now, let's move out a little bit farther in time. Here we are now, the end of next week, going into President's Day weekend, and we'll see these interesting trough right here by the time we get into almost 2 weeks out. This is now February 20th, and remember I pointed out kind of an active southern branch of the jet stream, and here we go. This will be kind of the storm path later on this month, and notice up here we have a lot of the orange over Greenland, over the Arctic region, the North Pole region. This is associated with what we call the negative NAO teleconnection pattern, negative AO, and this is why I point out these teleconnection indices. The higher heights to normal, the higher pressures to normal will be over Greenland, northern Canada, later next week going into the following week, and all that allows for the transport of cold air masses from northern Canada into the central and eastern U.S. So again, a very favorable pattern for colder than normal conditions beginning later next week going into the following week for the central and eastern U.S. and probably an active pattern here with this enhanced southern branch of the jet stream. Well, now let's look at the ensemble run again of the European model from 0Z with respect to 850 millibar temperature anomalies. By the way, I tend to favor showing 850 millibar temperature anomalies, which is a few thousand feet off the ground level, because if you look at the surface, it's just not as smooth because of the mountains, and it's just much more of a smoother look here to look a few thousand feet off the ground. Typically, they're correlated pretty well. If you're colder than normal at 850 millibars, you're likely colder than normal at 2 meters. Not always, but at the ground level. But this just shows it in a much more smooth kind of a display map here. Now, let's move forward. A lot of warmer than normal conditions at the lowest levels of the atmosphere across Canada, across the central U.S., really focused most intense relative to normal over the northern plains. Right along the I-95 corridor region, it's kind of chilly. It's not too far from normal in places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. That will change by the weekend. We'll have another kind of a short spurt in temperatures, probably the 60s on Saturday afternoon, for example, in D.C. But let's quickly move forward here. Well above normal conditions over the next 24, 48 hours or so. Hudson Bay region of Canada into the Great Lakes region. And again, that kind of transitions to the eastern states later this week. Friday, much warmer than normal. Philly, D.C., New York City, Saturday, probably the peak of this upcoming surge in temperatures. Again, maybe the low to mid 60s in D.C. on Saturday. Could be some showers associated with that mild weather as well. Now, let's move forward here now into the weekend here. Here's Saturday, and here we go into the day on Sunday. And here's one thing I want to point out. One of the unfavorable factors for snow, let's say in the immediate I-95 corridor region with this potential storm system early next week, is that cold air will not be established on the front end. It's the front end of the transition, and that makes it much more difficult to get accumulating snow places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. You'd rather see cold air well established before an influx of moisture. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it just makes it more difficult. If you're in the higher elevations, central PA, northeastern PA, it's not nearly as difficult as it is in the urban areas of the I-95 corridor region. But here we are next Monday. And now let's move forward here into the day on Tuesday. It does turn colder, and that storm system will draw in some cold air. That's really what we have to watch for from the north and west into the I-95 corridor system. And it turns colder relative to normal by the middle of next week. And take a look here as we get into the latter part of next week. Again, this is using the ensemble run of the European model, which again tends to smooth things out. Well, here we are now, some 15 to 20 degrees below normal by the time we get to the end of next week. This is next Friday, February 16th, and that's quite a healthy change. Again, let's go from this right now to today, Wednesday, the 7th, all the way out to something like this by the end of next week. That's, again, Friday of next week. By the way, all these maps available at tropicaltidbits.com. Let's go out a little farther in time and look at this. This is very impressive when you are more than 10 days out in an ensemble forecast, all the way out to next Saturday, the 17th. This is President's Day weekend. Of course, President's Day is famous for snowstorms along the Mid-Atlantic, in the Mid-Atlantic region. Just saying, something we'll have to look for. May come somewhere around this weekend into President's Day, which is officially that Monday, the holiday. This is Saturday, the 17th of February, and we're looking at some maybe 15 degrees below normal in the Mid-Atlantic region, according to the ensemble run, maybe even more than this. Again, keeping in mind that the ensemble run tends to smooth things out. We'll just kind of quickly go out a little farther in time and all the way out to February 21st. That's about 2 weeks from today. Very impressive, colder than normal pattern here. Way out, 2 weeks from today. And again, I think this change in the overall pattern has some staying power. And given the current stratospheric warming that's going on over the next week to 10 days or so, it could extend all the way into the middle of March. Now let's wrap up with the surface forecast from last night's conventional run of the GFS. Sorry this video is taking so long here. We'll kind of move quickly here. And again, we've talked about those warmer than normal conditions out, especially out over the north central part of the nation. Here we go. This is tomorrow morning's forecast map. A broad fetch of air out of the southwest to the northeast. This is associated with much above normal conditions over the Great Lakes, much of the upper part of the Midwest, and it kind of translates to the eastern seaboard by the time we get to Friday, and especially Saturday. Here's Friday starting to get milder, probably in the 50s along the I-95 corridor region. And then Saturday morning, probably the warmest day. It will have clouds, and there could even be some showers, places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City later in the day at night. So the clouds may keep temperatures down a little bit compared to what they could reach if indeed it turned out sunny. But we have this frontal system, and then we have eyes turned to the south and west. And I think the GFS run from 0Z last night has a pretty good handle on the situation. By the way, quite different from the 060 run. And you notice I've mentioned before, I favor the 0Z and the 12Z runs over the 18Z and 060 runs for one important reason. The 0Z and the 12Z runs have fresh radius-on data as input, whereas the 18Z and the 6Z have stale, 6-hour-old radius-on data. And radius-on data is critical. Certainly, I'll take the fresh radius-on data even for an older model run like this. It's 0Z as compared with the 6Z. Trust me, upper air data is critically important when you're dealing with potential snowstorms 5-6 days out or 10 days out, or whatever the case may be. I think this run has a pretty good handle on the situation. Likely to see an intensifying low pressure area. This is now the Monday evening forecast map, and it depicting rain in D.C. and Philadelphia, snow up across those higher elevation locations, central PA into the northeastern PA. Probably not a bad forecast map the way I see it. Again, cold air will not be well established on the front end of this storm system, on the front end of this overall transition to the pattern. Will go a little farther in time. An intensifying low, it certainly can pull in enough cold air to cause a changeover to snow in other sections of the Mid-Atlantic, maybe even into the I-95 corridor region. That's something we'll have to focus in on over the next few days here. But it pulls off the coast, and we get that colder air mass in here by the middle of next week into the Mid-Atlantic region. Then we'll just go out a little bit farther in time. A little bit of a clipper system that is showing some signs that it's going to have to be monitored, this clipper system, mid-latter part of next week. It may become stronger than what's appearing right here. And then we go all the way into the next weekend here. And again, we'll have to watch for this. This is, of course, President's Day weekend. And something we'll have to watch for next week. That's many, many days to go. But again, all systems a go for a significant temperature pattern change next week, beginning next week, across the central and eastern states. It looks like there'll be a storm system to deal with on the front end of this transition early next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. By the way, the California storm is now moving into the Rocky Mountain states. It will produce a lot of snow over the next 24, 48, 72 hours or so in those higher elevations of the Rockies, and then all the way up into the northern plains, places like Minnesota and North Dakota. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.